and welcome back. As you might know, I have been bookbinding for a few years now. I first started bookbinding back in 2019, around the time I got married. And I had a very functional reason for it. I was looking for a guest book, and I didn't like any of the guest books that I saw anywhere. So I was like, I'm just gonna make my own. I made a couple of practice books just to get my hands around bookbinding. Thank you, Cinnamon. And then once I was comfortable with the bookbinding, aka I was like 3 days away from the wedding, I made the guest book. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. At that time, I didn't really think about the fact that photos would expand the thickness of the book. Didn't really account for that, so I started putting photos in, and then it was like, oh, this is getting thicker, and the spine does not accommodate for that. But otherwise, it did exactly what I wanted it to. People signed it. I included some kind of pre-wedding notes from the best man and the maid of honor, and then my husband and I each wrote bios for each other, and then we gave some information about ourselves, so it's kind of a nice little thing that we can go back and reflect on. The guest book is not the point of this video. The point of this video is I have been making books for fun for a while, and I want to take that to the next level. Now, what's that next level, you might be asking yourself? I know Cinnamon is. Well, I was thinking, why not turn bookmaking into a little game show? Introducing Will It Book, the new game show where we find out if random items will turn into a book. On today's episode of Will It Book, we're going to be taking soda tabs and seeing if those will turn into books. So by a book, I don't mean that all of the pages are going to be whatever that material is. I am literally just making the cover out of that material and then binding the pages really however fits with that medium. So for soda tabs, I'm not going to make a book this tiny because that's ridiculously small. Instead, what I'm going to do is learn how to chainmail them because I hate myself. Attach them together like chainmail, and then that will make my cover. Because I don't think that glue is going to adhere very well to the metal of the tab, I'm not going to be able to do a glue-based case-in. In other words, while this book is held in primarily by the end pages being glued to the text block, I'm going to have to sew my signatures directly into the cover. Exactly how this is going to work is going to depend on where everything sits once the chainmail is completed. So first thing we're gonna do is learn how to turn soda tabs into chainmail. So without further ado, let's find out. Will it book? So based on my 2-second venture on Pinterest, there's basically two different ways that I could go about doing this. One is to take these and some thread and basically weave the thread through them so they kind of create this back and forth pattern, which is all well and good, but I am a little worried about the flexibility of going basically completely 180 on the spine. Because while I don't need a perfect 90-degree angle to get from the spine to a cover, I do want something close, and I worry that there would be some issues with getting that, and I don't feel like trying to measure things out. Also, I don't really want this whole thing to be held together with thread. So, the other option, basically you take your pop can tab and you bend it slightly, like that. And then you cut a slit in that top notch. And then you feed, and then you basically just feed 2 tabs into it. And then close that slot back up. And then they just sort of sit together and you can keep on building them out for however large you want them to be. So this is the route that I am leaning towards, because then it's all kind of one cohesive piece. And the nice thing is it does seem pretty strong. The only downfall is that there's always going to be that slit there that everything could just fall apart. So with that, we have kind of our proof of concept. We have the direction we're going to go. So I guess now I just need to do this a bunch more times. So, cue the montage. So let's talk about how this is going. This is where I'm at. It's not very big. I will give you that much. It is quite small, but I think it's gonna be big enough. Frankly, this whole process is killing my hands, and I've already been at this for a few hours, which has been great because I managed to finish the audiobook I was listening to, but also it's been a while, hence the artificial light. I think I went through about half to 2/3 of my tabs, so I still have some left if I decide later on that I hate myself enough to try to do something more with these. Find off in the comments below if I should make something else. In the meantime, this guy is about 8 by 9, which means when I fold him over, he's gonna be about 4 by 8. There's obviously some flex because the edges are not straight lines. I will say it holds up a lot better than I thought it would, given that the tabs are literally split open. Would I trust this to protect me in a sword fight? Absolutely not. But for the purposes of a book cover, I think this will be great. So I do want to emphasize it has to fold this way, because if I try to fold it along the width, it just doesn't. I do think during this process there will be a couple places, mostly along the edges, that will need patchwork, like right here. But we'll get to it as we get to it. In any case, I'm gonna call it a day. I'm gonna give my hands a break, and when we come back tomorrow, we'll be focusing on getting the paper trimmed to size, folded into signatures, and ready to sew into the cover. I will see you tomorrow. Welcome to day 2 of the chainmail project. I've laid my chainmail out on a flat surface so that it doesn't get tangled up in itself, because it's done that a few times now. There are 2 major things I want to accomplish today. One is binding of the pages to the cover. This is a fairly simple process. I'm going to take my paper, I'm going to trim it down so that's the same size as my cover, fold them in half. I'm thinking probably 2 or 3 signatures. It's not going to be a thick book. I'll have to punch holes into the pages themselves, but then the cover already has pre-made holes, so that makes that part easier. I just need to sew everything together. So that's the first thing I want to do today. The second thing I want to do is stabilize the chainmail, because I don't know if you noticed, but this is pretty flippity floppity flimsy, which is more or less fine when you're wearing it on your body, because then it forms to you, but on a book, as a book cover, it's gonna flip over on itself and it's not gonna be very effective. So I want to stabilize just a little bit so that it's not flopping too much. So right now, what I'm thinking is gonna work pretty well is just taking a thin wire, literally just a 28 gauge like photo hanging wire, and feeding it more or less just along the edges. And I say the edges so that's not impeding the overall design and vibe of the chainmail. We'll start with the signatures and we'll go from there. So I have my first signature sewn in. Front looks, I'll say, pretty okay. Obviously there is the issue of the chainmail being super flippity floppity, but I don't hate it. The spine is really where things kind of start to drop off. I think because I really wanted to make sure that all of my sewing was in a row, it's sort of squeezing the chainmail, especially because I do pull my thread tight and the thread is sitting on top of the chainmail. It's basically kind of squishing it down. It makes a lot of that fluidity kind of go away, but it also kind of turns it into a cluster. And then there's the back, which honestly doesn't look too bad. I think I probably could have gone like 1 or 2 rows over and the 2 cover sides would have been even. It's fine. It is a fixable issue because basically all I need to do is just extend this. I still have plenty of pop tabs that I can add a couple more rows and it's not that big a deal. What I am concerned about is the wire. So I've just for a test sort of threaded a wire through. I'm not sure that the 28 gauge wire is going to be strong enough on its own to hold the chainmail together. By that I mean I don't think it's going to add the structural integrity necessary to keep the chains from going like this. It's fine. I mean, the thing to keep in mind is we are testing to see if chainmail made out of pop can tabs can be turned into a book. Whether or not that book has structural integrity is a completely different measurement than can it be turned into a book. This is not something that we're gonna like produce in mass. But also, the general purpose of a cover is to protect the pages inside, right? Which I think we can argue it will, as long as it's laying down. I'm going to sew in 2 more signatures. I'm going to try to sew them into the same row as this first one. I am then going to add a few more rows to the back end just to give it enough length to kind of match up with the front. Once all that's done, we will do the final reveal and then we'll come back and talk about it. Let's go. Final thoughts. This process took a while. I wouldn't say this was a particularly challenging project, but I will say it was a bit monotonous, especially going through the process of preparing the soda tabs and then linking them together. I will say no matter how many times I go in and re-link things and make sure that it's closed tightly, things still are coming unlinked. It's not all over the place, so I don't think it's a super heavy structural issue, but it's happened enough that it's annoying. I don't love that when you hold it, it just sort of like flops. If I were to do this project again, first of all, I wouldn't. To answer the question of the show, will it book? Technically, yes, but not well. I do think that this could be a really cool concept for covering an already put together book. So like building a hardback and then using this as sort of an addition. But structurally, this is not going to protect the book from anything. It's very floppity and flimsy. Even while we were outside, the cover did nothing to protect the book from elements. So I have some dirt and just grossness that was on the ground. I think this would be like an interesting like Ren Bear accessory for somebody that wants to bring a notebook with them. Because at first glance it's just a piece of chainmail and then surprise, it's a book. So for the novelty, it's amazing, but for a practical use, absolutely not. If I were to do this again, I would probably just adhere the entirety of the chainmail to a hardback cover, show some underneath elements. As far as this project is concerned, I will probably be ripping the pages out of this and reusing the chainmail itself for something else. So I wouldn't say this was a fail. I learned how to make soda tap chainmail out of this. Let me know what you think I should make next in the comments down below, and if you like this video, you should like it, and also you should subscribe to my channel because I post videos regularly now and I'm actually being consistent. Wow. Whatever other things YouTubers say now, I don't know. I will see you next Wednesday. Okay, bye.